can start.
So do we start?
Yes. Hello, my dear colleagues. Good afternoon and welcome to this session on diagnostic challenges in hypothyroidism. I'm Dr. H.V. Chandalia. I work at the Jaslok as Director of Endocrinology, Diabetes and Metabolism. And with me, there are very able two endocrinologists, Dr. Bipin Kumar Shetty, who is a consultant endocrinologist at the Care Hospital, Hyderabad, and Dr. Chitra, Associate Professor of Endocrinology for Ramaiah Medical College, Bangalore. So together we are going to discuss this very interesting aspect, which all of you need to know in clinical practice, and that is diagnostic challenges in hypothyroidism. Although it sounds simple, interpretation of T3, T4, TSH or thyroid tests, but it can be quite complex at times. So we will be taking you through some of these very, very interesting examples. And the format of this whole discussion is more of the case histories and diagnosis. So it is going to be of immense help to the practicing doctors. Remember that hypothyroidism, depending upon which section of population you are discussing, can be anywhere from 5 to 10%. You know, like past middle-aged populations can be like 5%. And subclinical hypothyroidism takes another 5 to 10%. So you can say this is a very highly prevalent disease, and you truly, everybody is concerned about it. It starts from the family physician to a consultant, medical, or for that matter, specialist in all other branches of medicine have to be aware of this particular disease. So with that introduction, I would like to introduce, I would like to request Dr. Chitra to give her talk, a basic talk on diagnostic challenges in hypothyroidism. Thereafter, of course, the format is I'll speak briefly also about few case histories. Then we'll take your questions. We'll have good 15-20 minutes for question answers. So you are welcome to start, sending the questions. And of course, in the end, Dr. Bipin Shetty is going to sum up the whole presentations, and he's going to give you the key takeaway points. So I think this is the format we're going to follow. So Dr. Chitra, kindly start your presentation.
Thank you, Professor Chandalia and Dr. Bipin Shetty for giving me this opportunity and chairing this session. It's always a pleasure, and I'm hoping that all of you are well and taking care of yourself and adapting very quickly to these changing times. But we tend to do better and feel better when we're doing things we are good at. So let's go back and strengthen our scientific knowledge in an attempt to make sense of the craziness of the times that we live in. So we're going to be spending the next 15 to 20 minutes discussing the challenges which you and I are likely to encounter while we go about our daily clinical practice when it comes specifically to the interpretation of thyroid function tests. So the objectives begin with understanding the tenets or let's say the thumb rules by which we go about interpreting thyroid function tests, and also that each individual thyroid profile test is to be interpreted holistically in the context of the clinical scenario and that particular patient's predicament, and not just the report as is beginning to be sent to us through social media. And also to be wary of the common pitfalls that could get in the way of us making common mistakes. And the most important tenet by which thyroid function tests are interpreted by this very simple negative feedback loop, which we've all been exposed to right from medical school. We all know that there are 3 tiers of control in the hypothalamic, pituitary, and thyroid axis. So from the level of the hypothalamus, we have secretion of TRH, or the thyrotrophin releasing hormone, which acts on the thyrotropes at the anterior pituitary, causing the release of TSH, which then acts at the level of the thyroid hormone to cause the release of two separate thyroid hormones, T4 and T3, both of which act at the level of pituitary and hypothalamus to regulate feedback negatively. And this is a very tight regulation. The relationship between TSH and T4 is an exquisitely sensitive, well-controlled one. And if you're going to look at the relationship between TSH and free T4, you see here that for every small change which happens with the free T4 or the T4 levels, the changes are manifold in TSH levels. So this is referred to as log linear relationship, and also the relationship is reverse. So a fall in free T4 levels will cause a rise in TSH level and vice versa. So even a small change in free T4 level will cause a manifold increase in TSH. So mostly they are moving in opposite directions. These two tenets are most important for us to keep in mind while we go about discussing case scenarios. So it's important to know, like I've said before, that this is not interpretation of just isolated figures per se. We need to understand the clinical background, the clinical context, the concomitant drugs that have been part of the patient's routine, and what could be the functional status on clinical examination, whether the patient is appearing toxic, presenting with symptoms which are suggestive of hypothyroidism, and also to understand that TSH and T4 are part of a larger complex of the hypothalamic pituitary axis, and also to know that there are certain changes which are inherent to the lab and the assays which are used, and interpretation is going to be a holistic approach. So we'll quickly begin with cases. This would have been lovely if we would have had opportunities to bring in the voice of the audience as we went about these cases to know what your thought process was. But we'll try and make the best use of the platform that we are on. So this is an individual who is 76-year-old, who was previously normal, admitted to the ICU with recent complaints of palpitations. And this was the ECG that was done. And you see that his pulse is varying anywhere between 84 to 112 per minute. His blood pressure is 100/50. He has a normal chest auscultation. And he's been started on digoxin for a while, but it's failed to lower his heart rate. And in the bid to understand what is going on, the cardiologist asked for a thyroid profile test. And you see you have your patient's TSH level of 0.04 microinternational units per liter, and free T4 levels which are within normal range. So what do you think is the likely diagnosis? I know we said diagnostic challenges of hypothyroidism to start with, but I thought we should be looking at the entire spectrum of challenges in interpretation of thyroid function tests. So the ECG doesn't look normal, the rate is irregular, so the patient is QRS complex is looking normal, but P waves seem to be occurring independently of the QRS complex, suggesting atrial flutter or fibrillation. And the most likely diagnosis in this situation, because TSH is suppressed, is subclinical thyrotoxicosis. So you can have thyrotoxicosis levels even with normal free T4 levels. That's the picture. And the patient has presented with a rhythm abnormality, which is also a manifestation of thyrotoxicosis. So subclinical thyrotoxicosis usually does not warrant treatment in most situations, but it does in certain situations, and this is one of those situations. We have a patient who's presented with an arrhythmia. That's an indication to treat subclinical thyrotoxicosis. And the second clinical condition where treatment for subclinical thyrotoxicosis is mandated is osteoporosis. So although free T4 levels are normal, this patient has subclinical thyrotoxicosis. I would like the audience to bear that in mind. All right, moving on to another case scenario. We have a 23-year-old lady who's newly married, who's complaining of feeling tired and sleepy. Her pulse rate is around 100 per minute. Her blood pressure is 110/70, and her TSH is less than 0.01 microinternational units per ml. What do you think we should get the next test to be, and what do you think the diagnosis is? So I see a chat box. Is anybody volunteering answers? Okay, so my chat box is in my view. So if you're typing in your answers, I'll be able to see it. So we went ahead and asked for a urine pregnancy test, which turned out to be positive. Is there a connection between a positive urine pregnancy test and this thyroid profile test? Yes. In the first trimester of pregnancy, you see that the HCG levels, which is the pink curve, tends to rise, and HCG has a TSH-like activity. So in the first trimester, with the inherent surge of HCG which occurs with the first trimester, you could have a TSH suppression, which in turn would mean that when you do a thyroid profile test in the first trimester of pregnancy, your TSH can come suppressed. So making sure that you've ruled out pregnancy in a situation like this where TSH is suppressed and T4, T3 levels are normal and the patient is looking euthyroid, and this is called normal physiological changes in thyroid function test during pregnancy. So that's something to keep in mind. So moving on to the next case, we have a 45-year-old gentleman who's been diagnosed with Graves' disease and has been on carbimazole 30 milligrams per day. 4 months later, he comes in for a follow-up, and now his thyroid profile shows a TSH of 0.03 and a free T4 of 0.76. Okay, so the TSH is still suppressed, but free T4 is towards the lower end of normal. The clinical scenario is he's gained about 6 kgs of weight in these last 4 months. He's also complaining of muscle cramps, and on examination, he shows delayed relaxation phase of the ankle jerk. So what's the likely explanation of the TFT? Because the TSH is suppressed, do you think he's toxic? But the clinical picture does not seem to suggest toxic phase, but it's likely to suggest hypothyroid phase. How do you interpret this thyroid profile test? So this is a common scenario which we commonly encounter, and very often we see physicians interpreting it in all sorts of ways. So I think it was important to clarify this clinical context. So when you're treating individuals with Graves' disease, the TSH can remain suppressed for several months, even after resolution of the thyrotoxic state. So in this scenario, titration of medication is dependent on the T4 levels, specifically the free T4 levels in this context, and also the clinical scenario. So the patient has gained 6 kgs of weight and the free T4 levels are less than normal limit. So in this situation, it would warrant you to reduce the antithyroid medications, not stop it completely. That's also a thing which is done often. Tighter down the antithyroid medications and keep the patient on it. So why is the TSH continuing to be suppressed? There have been a few theories, although the exact reason is not completely understood. But the most accepted theory, maybe in the last few years, has been that there are TSH receptors on the follicular stellate cells at the level of the hypothalamus and the pituitary, and the stimulating antibodies which act at the level of the thyroid also can act at the level of the hypothalamus and pituitary, and it causes prolonged suppression of TSH secretion, although the patient's free T4 levels have come down. So this is one of those situations where you expect TSH to rise, but it is taking a little longer to rise as compared to a normal individual. All right. Moving on to the realm of individuals with primary hypothyroidism on treatment. So this is a 65-year-old individual who's on with a body weight of 65 kgs, who's on levothyroxine 100 micrograms per day. He comes, this is his annual follow-up visit, and you see that the TSH is 0.05 micro international units per liter, and the free T4 levels are 1.4 nanogram per deciliter. Now, should you reduce the dose of levothyroxine? Should you stop levothyroxine? What is going on? So this is also a common scenario which we encounter, probably much less common than the next scenario that I'm going to be talking about. Should you keep the same levothyroxine dose or reduce the dose? The answer is this. So in this situation, you will need to reduce the levothyroxine dose because TSH represents the cumulative effect of T4 at the level of the tissue. So between T4 and TSH is a better indicator of the tone of the levothyroxine dose that your patient is on. So in this situation, although free T4 levels are normal, you will titrate the dose of levothyroxine based on the TSH values. And here, since the TSH value is suppressed, we will be required to reduce the levothyroxine dose. There are many drugs or agents which could potentially decrease TSH levels. These are more likely to be relevant in individuals who are admitted inpatient and who receive either dopamine or glucocorticoids, which could have a transient drop in TSH levels. But usually in an OPD basis or an individual who is not receiving any of these medications chronically, it's likely to be an overdose of levothyroxine. All right. Moving on to the next case scenario, we have a 28-year-old lady who's presented with menorrhagia, who has a family history of thyroid disease. On examination, she has a small goiter. Clinically, she's looking euthyroid otherwise. She brings in her thyroid function test, and this is what it shows. Her TSH levels are at 8 microinternational units per liter, and total T4 levels are within normal range, and her anti-TPO antibodies are positive. So what is the probable diagnosis here? So T4 levels are normal, TSH is slightly above the normal, and anti-TPO levels are positive. So here the diagnosis is subclinical hypothyroidism, where the definition of this condition is where you have elevated TSH with normal total T4 levels. In most clinical conditions, we tend to not treat subclinical hypothyroidism except in certain situations. Those situations tend to be when you have a goiter, when there is anti-TPO positivity, when you are likely to plan for pregnancy, or when you're receiving treatment or being managed for infertility, and very rarely even menorrhagia. In this patient, since there's a history of menorrhagia, since anti-TPO is positive, and since there's a small goiter, it would make sense to put her on levothyroxine and monitor TSH after 4 to 6 weeks. So this is a subclinical hypothyroidism. Moving on to scenarios which you're likely to see in your clinical practice as you have patients with primary hypothyroidism on treatment on follow-up. This is a 39-year-old lady with a body weight of 59 kgs. She's been on levothyroxine 88 microgram per day. She comes in with a TFT which looks like this. Her TSH is 17 microinternational units per liter, and her free T4 is 1.5 nanogram per deciliter. Now, here, should you increase levothyroxine dose, or should you hold the same? We've now understood that TSH is the parameter that we use to titrate levothyroxine dose, as we've learned from the previous case. So the logical answer should be, yes, we should increase levothyroxine. But life is different, and we have all burnt our fingers and learned that before you increase levothyroxine dose, you might need to sometimes inquire repeatedly, sometimes with all kinds of different methods of questioning whether the patient has been compliant with medications. So if a patient has missed maybe 20 to 30% of doses, and it's very easy to miss 20 to 30% of your dose. If you skip your dose on weekends when you wake up late, that's enough to miss 20 to 30% of your dose, and that can result in a TFT which looks like this. So rechecking whether there is compliance with levothyroxine is a good thing to do. And if you're absolutely sure that your patient is not missing any dose, then it would make sense to increase your levothyroxine dose. So we have another gentleman who's 56 years of age, who's been on 75 microgram of levothyroxine for the last 5 years. His current TSH is also at 17, and his free T4 is 0.8, slightly on the lower side. Now, his TFT, which was done 6 months ago on the same dose of levothyroxine of 75 microgram, was absolutely normal. And this time we've become smart, and we've asked him four different times, 4 different questions in 4 different types to check whether he's taking his medication properly. And he absolutely swears by it. Now, would you now increase the levothyroxine dose, or is there something else that you need to look at? So incidentally, there were 2 bits of information that he gave that could explain this TSH of 17 while he was on the stable dose of levothyroxine. Recently, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and he was started on anti-tuberculosis medications, which included rifampicin. We all know that rifampicin is a hepatic enzyme inducer, so it does increase your requirement of thyroxine dose when you go on rifampicin. also, because he'd lost weight because of the tuberculosis, his wife had started to give him around 200 ml of soy milk to drink as soon as he wakes up in the morning. And there has been evidence which is accumulated in the last few years to tell us that soy in particular seems to bring down levothyroxine absorption quite significantly, resulting in TSH dumps to the tune of 10 to 30 micro-international units per ml. So all we did for this patient was move his soy milk to the evening, and his TSH normalized after 6 weeks. So these are small things that we need to look up and check. So a number of drugs can commonly increase levothyroxine requirement. These two are quite rare, actually. The more common offenders tend to be calcium intake, especially during pregnancy. They tend to take their levothyroxine along with their calcium, even iron tablets for that matter. Sometimes using medications for peptic ulcer disease, which can decrease absorption, could also interfere with your TSH values. Dr. Chandalia also has some clinical scenarios to highlight the same for us. So this is a point to keep in mind if you want to get his answers right. Okay. So this is a 45-year-old male who's admitted with a febrile illness in the inpatient wards. His wife is 6 weeks pregnant. You might wonder why I'm quoting this history here, but all his parameters are normal, but except that his platelet count is low. So they have a diagnosis of febrile illness with thrombocytopenia, and they got a thyroid function test done, the physician team, and this is what it shows. The TSH level is normal, the T4 level is low, and the total T3 levels are low. Okay, so what do you think is the diagnosis? Otherwise, he's very normal. The fact that his wife is 6 weeks pregnant indicates that his pituitary should be functioning fairly well. That's the indication. So all of the systemic illnesses, especially if it is moderate or severe, tend to affect all parameters which are included under this umbrella of thyroid function test. So this is a compensatory mechanism instituted by the body to make sure that you get through the systemic illness with minimal expenditure wastefully of energy, with preserving energy. So one of the first few changes which occur when you are ill, the changes do not tend to be so obvious when you have a mild illness, but when you have a moderate illness, you begin to notice that the first few change which occurs is for the T3 levels to begin to drop. That's the line in pink. It begins to drop, and the reverse T3 levels begins to rise. And as a patient progresses from moderate illness to severe illness, you notice that the T4 levels begin to drop as well, and your TSH levels could also be suppressed. So, and when your patient recovers from this illness, the exact opposite of this is likely to happen. Your TSH can shoot up slightly higher than normal, and T4, T3 levels are likely to go up to normal. So this is a tabular column summarizing exactly what I've told you. I don't think we have the time to go into the mechanism of each of these changes, but the most common change is the T3 levels drop, and as the illness becomes more severe, you notice that T3 and T4 levels both can drop, and TSH can also drop. So this is one of those rare clinical scenarios where T4, T3, TSH are all moving in the same direction, contradicting what we learned in the first few scenarios. So the basic takeaway message is, do not generally ask for a thyroid function test during an illness, especially in an intensive care unit, unless absolutely required. And what are those conditions where you think you should definitely ask for a thyroid function test? It would be in a patient who's admitted or being evaluated for hyponatremia. And I will show you an example to figure out how this whole thing makes sense. Or in an individual who has been admitted with encephalopathy to rule out, let us say, hypopituitarism or myxedema coma as a diagnosis. Okay, so mostly it's not recommended to ask for thyroid function test unless you have a clinical pre-test reason for you to ask for a thyroid function test. Also be wary that the clinical scenario is likely to look like that: low T4, low T3, and normal or low TSH. Okay, moving on. This is the last case and probably the most important case. I think all endocrinologists want all of our physician friends to be bosses of dealing with this clinical scenario. And I have about 3 minutes to take you through this. So 72-year-old lady who's presented with recurrent episodes of altered sensorium for the last 2 years. She's been admitted repeatedly for this complaint. And in the last admission, she was found to have a sodium of 104 milliequivalents per liter, which is low, and a TSH of 6.73 microinternational units per liter, and a free T4, which is 0.64. Okay, so the treating team at this admission probably thought that it was CQ thyroid because the T4 levels are low and TSH levels are almost normal, but the sodium levels are low at 114. So how would you interpret this thyroid function test, and what should you ask for next? So as shown in the previous case, this is probably CQ thyroid, right? But there's something else which is happening. This patient has had multiple episodes. Probably all the episodes of altered sensorium are likely to be related to the hyponatremia. And we are beginning to evaluate why she's having recurrent episodes of hyponatremia. So while in CQ thyroid, you are likely to have low TSH and low T4 levels. In central hypothyroidism, where you do not have a TSH signal coming from the level of the pituitary, the clinical picture and the biochemical picture is likely to look exactly like that of CQ thyroid syndrome. So because the defect is at the level of the pituitary, for whatever reason that might be, your TSH signal will be low or normal, and your T4 levels will be low because there is no TSH to get your thyroid gland to produce the hormones. Okay, so but the clue to differentiate between central hypothyroidism and CQ thyroid is to look for the other associated hormone deficiency. The pituitary is a very small gland in a very cramped place. It does numerous important functions. So the clue to differentiate would be to look for the other functions which are secreted, other hormones which are secreted by the anterior pituitary. So in this lady, we went on and got the other anterior pituitary hormone levels done. And you see here that the prolactin level is 6.6 nanogram per ml, which is on the lower side but normal. But you see that the LH level and the FSH level are 4.58 and 4.2. Remember, this is a 72-year-old lady, so she's postmenopausal. Most postmenopausal women should have FSH in the range of more than 40, right? So in this patient, the fact that the FSH level is 4.2 is suggesting that there is pituitary dysfunction or hyperfunction. And you notice that the 8-AM cortisol level is 6.59 microgram per deciliter, towards the lower end of normal. So this is central hypothyroidism with central hypocortisolism with low gonadotropin levels and low normal prolactin levels. So the diagnosis is hypopituitarism. It's important to recognize this condition because here you will need to replace cortisol before you start your patient on levothyroxine. So in this patient, she was started on hydrocortisone followed by levothyroxine, following which her sensorium improved and your sodium also improved after 5 to 7 days. And at next visit and at every other visit after that, whenever she was monitored, her sodium levels remained normal. So the point I'm trying to highlight is hypopituitarism is an often missed cause of hyponatremia evaluation. And it's very difficult to pick up this condition unless it's specifically looked for. And recurrent hyponatremia is a perfect situation where you will think of this condition and bring up this diagnosis. Is very commonly missed and picked up very often by us in the ICU settings with recurrent hospital admissions. So I think we've covered pretty much the first level of diagnostic challenges of a thyroid function test. I'm going to quickly now summarize all that we've spoken about by reiterating what we've spoken about. In a normal individuals, TSH, T4, and T3 are likely to remain within normal range. When your TSH is suppressed, irrespective of how free T4, free T3 is, it would be thyrotoxic. If your free T4, free T3 levels are high, that is toxicosis. If your TSH is suppressed and free T4, free T3 are normal, it is called subclinical thyrotoxicosis or subclinical hyperthyroidism. In hypothyroidism, your TSH levels will be high and your T4, T3 levels in most cases will remain normal, but in very severe untreated hypothyroidism, your TSH will be very high and your T4, T3 levels could also fall. The other group of condition is where your TSH level is low and T4, T3 levels are normal, and that is subclinical hypothyroidism or SICU thyroid or non-thyroidal illness, as shown in this picture. NTI stands for non-thyroidal illness. And the other mix-up of thyroid function you could see is TSH levels being high and T4, T3 levels being normal. Most common condition here is subclinical hypothyroidism. And lastly, T4, T3 levels are low and TSH levels low, very likely to be SICU thyroid, but a close DD will be central hypothyroidism / hypopituitarism, to be kept in mind, to be maybe made a diagnosis of with the help of an endocrinologist if it's not clear and obvious. And we've not had time to discuss TSH levels being high and T4, T3 levels being high. I'm hoping we'll have another discussion of this at some point. So quickly moving on to conclusions. TSH remains the best bet of a screening test in all healthy individuals. Of course, you might need to get additional tests of free T4 levels in certain situations where you're suspecting central hypothyroidism or in pregnancy and situations like that. But for every other condition, TSH remains the one single best test to detect up to 99% of all thyroid disorders. Interpretation of abnormal TSH or thyroid function test always occurs with relation to the clinical context of taking in the entire picture. Keep your eye out for routine spoilers of concomitant medications that your patient is on, physiological states like pregnancy, and rare disorders or rare drugs that the individual might be on, and rare diagnoses like central hypothyroidism. But it's always and equally important to know when to ask for help, when you should bring in an endocrinologist to help you make a diagnosis of hypopituitarism. And it's going to be absolutely gratifying if you're able to keep a person from recurrent hospitalizations by making a diagnosis. So the temple of diagnosis is supported by 4 strong pillars. One would be proper history taking, the second would be a decent clinical examination, and a third would be a quick review of all the medications and the concomitant conditions, and then we come to lab tests. And if we tend to miss one, the temple is likely to be wobbly. If we miss more than one, the temple is likely to not stand on solid ground. So that's the end of my talk. I hand over to my chairpersons, Dr. Professor Chandalia and Dr. Bipin Sethi to take over. I think I finished in time.
Yes, you did. Okay. So thank you, Dr. Chitra, for presenting these very, very interesting cases. And I would take the same theme further and show you some other interesting cases. And some of them, in fact, all of them are the real ones which I have come across. So